We are today, we're going to talk all things nutrition. You're going to through taste, smell, sound. But the theme today really is about, kind of health and nutrition, because, we live in an age where we are almost inundated with information about food and health as well. There's a lot of contradicting information. And, if we can kind of come out with practical, accessible modalities, interventions, and behaviours that improve health, we can make dramatic changes. So I'm just here as a bit of a food nerd. I'm an osteopath and a naturopath. Naturopathy being the application of nutrition within natural medicine. So I have also a passion for food. So hopefully I can give you some pearls of wisdom. And also, I imagine there are some nutrition commandos amongst the crowd here. And if there are, this is a forum. We want, we want to interact with you guys, because your experiences and your professional and personal experiences will all contribute to what we do, or how we're influenced beyond this. Now, I will say that we've got lots of information, but the idea and the theme is practical application. So we need to be able to go away and do things. It's not just about knowing, because we probably know a lot of things that we should be doing, but we don't do it. And the question is why? What kind of drives our behaviours? What stimulates us to the point where we actually take charge of our own health, and we modify our habits and implement good nutrition. Who knows? If there's a pill for it, I'd be a millionaire, but there isn't. So, for me, it's about practice. I practice it, I live it. I study it, I live it, I breathe it, because it's important to me, and it should be important to you, because it's the seat of all of your health. It's one thing we've got in common. We are all simply a product of the raw materials that we absorb. Not necessarily what we eat, what we absorb. So that's me, Ricky Brown, naturopath, osteopath. And on to my esteemed
I'm Andrew Draper, and I'm a chef, so my whole theory behind it is how to facilitate. A lot of people feel that diets are restrictive, unimaginative, food's boring. My whole thing is how to convert it, balance it, pimp it, so that it affects your lifestyle and that you can actually carry on enjoying it and create variety within the food. So I'll be helping you with questions as regards substitutions and that type of thing.
So let's start by finding out who are the nutritional commandos in here. Put your hands up if you have an interest professionally or personally in nutrition.
Yeah, I'm a nutritional therapist.
You're a nutritional therapist, fantastic, great. We're getting lots of good input from yourself. Anybody else? Don't be shy, raise that finger to the room. And your name?
My name's Sophie Shan.
Sophie Shan, yes, you're a nutritionist, dietitian. I don't know what to say, because nutrition.
I would say I've got more of a naturopathic training, but my accreditation is nutritional therapist.
Fantastic. Oh, we're going to be coming at you from all angles today. Yeah, so let's start with the basics. The last 10-15 years we've had an overwhelming amount of kind of nutritional information, nutritional entertainment on TV. I think early 90s even. Well, yeah, early 90s, late 80s, since the days of Gordon Ramsay and Jamie Oliver, bursting onto our screens and swearing and throwing food around and things, And it started off as, kind of mouth-watering entertainment more than anything, and it's progressed. It's become more ethical, it's become more practical, it's become more conscious, it's become more health-based. So, we are, more than ever, now in time, we have more information at our disposal.
Yeah, I remember thinking like, back in the day, you'd have a person lecturing at you how you should do, what you should do, what you should eat. And now it's more of a negotiation. It's very simple. Like, in the past, we used to abuse the earth, and essentially now they're coming up to look after the earth. And the whole thing behind it is essentially look after yourself. And it is as natural as possible. Essentially, what you put in is essentially what you'll get out. So it's very simple math, all science.
So with that in mind, we as a species are getting sicker. You know, we've got all this amazing information, all the tools to help us, but we're getting progressively sicker. So where, you know, what's going on? Is it that we're just not, we're overwhelmed, we're not applying the information, we don't have the time, the interest?
Or that you create social media where essentially you can have gimmick diets,
Yeah.
which essentially could be very harmful to you, a lot of these gimmick diets going around at the moment. We all agree that essentially if you take things out of your diet, you will lose weight, but it's not the right way to lose weight, it's not the healthy way to do so.
Yeah. So diets per se, I mean, you guys would probably agree that, you know, the word diet is demonized in many people's minds because it kind of reflects abstinence, restriction, and you know, that's all. It's only for a certain amount of time, and then I'll have to default back to where I came from. You know,
90% of people on diets essentially are.
Oh, yeah. There's,
and lifestyles are different.
When we restrict calories, you know, the body does respond, you know, very intelligently by conserving energy, and ultimately most diets do end up with, when we revert back or when we stop this diet, we tend to you know, go back to square one and even beyond. So I'm going to try and be as diplomatic as possible. I'm a Yorkshireman, and please forgive me if I offend you, but I'm a straight talker, you know, and because this is my passion, I'm going to be as I say, as kind of
I'm a TV chef. I'm not a TV chef. If you've seen TV chefs, in all sincerity, I will offend you both.
So, functional gastrointestinal disorders. You know, a lot of our society suffer from gastrointestinal functional, you know, how would I say it? Difficulties. Whether it's gas, bloating, abdominal pain, irregular stools and things like that. And a lot of it goes under the radar. You know, you go to the GP and they say, hey, I've got this stomach pain, and you know, I'm bloating, and you know, they may do a battery of tests, and a lot of the clinical tests, you know, you might not get any kind of you know, concrete evidence for anything going on. So whether it's a stool sample, blood tests for inflammatory markers, whether it's gut biopsies and things like that, you know, often we don't get any form of you know, resolution. And what we call these kind of, you know, under the radar things, subclinical kind of disorders, there are a lot of them, and they are increasing, steadily increasing. And there's a lot of hype around certain food stuff, such as, what am I going to say? Gluten, yes, a lot of hype around gluten. That's the criminal, that's public enemy number one at the moment. And you know, so we have to be able to dismantle some of this and be able to say, well, okay, what does the science say? What do we have at our exposure with regards to systematic reviews, randomized controlled trials and things, to be able to actually ground ourselves, because nutrition, it seems to be very guru-driven nowadays. You know, you might have a celebrity, you might have someone who looks really good, someone who's really popular, got a lot of money behind them, or they've helped celebrities in the past, and you know, and suddenly there's these amazing diets that come out on the scene, and people saying, don't do this, don't eat that, and we follow it because, you know, it works for these amazing people. But, you know, we have to ground ourselves at some point in evidence. So for me, hopefully we can come to some, you know, kind of real kind of evidence-based, you know, interventions by the end of the day that we can take home. So going back to these gastrointestinal functional disorders, anybody suffering or has suffered from things like, you know, regular gas, bloating, stomach pains, you know, irregular stools. You know, and we could go into extra intestinal symptoms such as fatigue, headaches, mood changes. You know, very common. But you know, you go to a doctor and say, oh, you know, it just won't go away. And, you know, but you don't get any resolution because they're looking at, you know, overt pathological symptoms that they can actually test and find in test results. So, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, wheat intolerance, what would say, IBS, gluten, we're not going to say, yeah, gluten intolerance. What else would we say?
Dairy.
Dairy, yeah. But other conditions that we could label and say that, you know, we're not going to get resolution from the regular GP appointment. Any kind of examples?
Migraines.
Migraines, yeah.
But to me, absorption. How
Sorry.
do you know whether we absorb our food?
Yeah, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. But first of all, we're going to highlight some of the conditions where this absorption comes in and plays a major role.
And how much you need as well. Because I think a lot of the times we sit there and say, oh, you know, we need excess vitamin C, we need these, and you know, we have these wonder drugs like vitamin C, all these type of things. And sometimes, you know, unless you're sick or you desperately need something and that type of thing, some of them are excessive. It becomes a very expensive way to urinate.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just call it gut dysbiosis, okay? A kind of, how do I say it, an imbalance of good and bad bacteria in the gut. So the intestinal tract, the gut, a tube running from the mouth to the anus, okay, and along that journey we take things into the body, what we need, and we excrete things out, okay? And along that journey there are thousands of little things that are there to help us, and there are also some nasties that are not there to help us as well. So digestion starts in the mouth. We chew our food, hopefully. We secrete enzymes, then it goes down through the esophagus into the stomach, where we then, you know, churn it all up, release more enzymes to break down certain things. It goes into the small intestine. That's where the magic happens, where most of the magic happens, okay? So the pancreas releases enzymes, the gallbladder does, and we get this, you know, this breaking down of nutrients. And in this stage, this is where things can start to go wrong. You know, our absorption is really reliant upon the kind of integrity of the gut, of the mucosa, the lining of the small intestine. And also, whatever goes through goes into the colon. And in the colon, we also have bacteria, lots and lots of different bacteria, which are supposed to help us, and supposed to, you know, kind of help the integrity of the gut wall, and also be responsible for creating, you know, certain fatty acids that are going to, you know, kind of help us digest and absorb nutrients which are going to be beneficial for us. However, these, you know, kind of common symptoms such as gas, bloating, irregular bowel movements, and they're all signs that there may be an underlying, you know, kind of subtle issue with the gastrointestinal lining. And have we all heard of things like leaky gut, intestinal permeability? So these are becoming more and more prevalent, partly because we can test better for it now, but also because we are eating a lot more foods which are not beneficial for us. Okay, really trying to be.
I saw you do that little subtle smile there, like.
So ultimately, you know, we are what we absorb, not what we eat. That's the theme of today. So in the small intestine, we have a lining, an epithelial lining, a lining of cells, which is, you know, that's where the magic happens. Things pass through, and, you know, things are ejected and passed on into the colon. Sometimes things get through the intestinal lining, which shouldn't, and that's because there are certain, you know, what we call junctions in the small intestine, which can sometimes be compromised. And there are a number of proteins and things that go on. I don't want to get too heavily into the science, but there are a number of, you know, gatekeepers which allow the passage of nutrients, of molecules from, you know, from the outside of the small intestine to the inside of the small intestine. The outside of the body I refer to as the inside of the stomach and the small intestine, because really it is outside of the body. If you imagine a tube going from your stomach to your anus, that is, so it's like a, you know, that is the outside. It's what goes through that tube and into us I refer to as being inside the body. Do you kind of get that? Yeah? You've fallen asleep already? So, gastrointestinal absorption. Why is it important to absorb our nutrients?
Vitamins. It makes us work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what are the most important macronutrients that we need to absorb to make us work? What are the most important things, nutrients, molecules? Protein?
Fats, carbohydrates.
Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, there's loads of stuff, isn't there? Loads of stuff. So, the bacteria that we have in our colon is really important to governing whether we are able to absorb nutrients, to reduce unfavourable responses to certain nutrients such as inflammation. And as I said, our diets nowadays, the Western diet, in inverted commas, seems to be unfavourable for promoting good gut health. So, what do you think is a balanced diet? What do you think is say you have a meal in front of you, what would you regard as a balanced meal? What would you have on your plate?
Vegetables.
Vegetables, yeah. What type of vegetables?
Potatoes, carrots, broccoli.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Beans. Ooh, there's a controversial one. We'll come back to beans, won't we? Sorry? Curly cow. Yeah. So let's think about macronutrients: protein, fats, carbohydrates. Let's think of ratios. What, say, 100% out of 100%, what would be carbohydrates? 10%? Nutritional therapists. Come on, help me out. 25, 50. So carbs, fats, 50%.
About 20, protein.
Is going to be how much?
About 30-40%.
Okay.
10-20%. 30% of your calories is fats, healthy fats.
Yeah. 30-40% carbohydrates, and the rest vegetables, not green vegetables.
I think it's important to actually point out for the layperson what is a carbohydrate and what's a protein. So if anyone doesn't know what a carbohydrate or a protein is, everyone knows that?
Yeah, sorry, I'm assuming
you've got a
you've got a baseline of nutritional knowledge. Yeah, I'm sorry, I should be. It's rather kind of, it's rather presumptuous of me. Do we all understand what protein, carbohydrate, and fat is?
Go through it, why not?
What's that?
Go through it, why not? Just a brief overview.
I think like proteins essentially are really what we regard as meats and those type of things. You do have a lot of other substitutes. There's also sort of dishes that sort of go between the two. They're sort of like complex carbohydrates that become fats and things and everything. So
yeah. So proteins, they basically break down to the building blocks of tissue, such as amino acids. You've got carbohydrates, which mostly used for energy, but can be converted to fat, and often are in our diet. But also without carbohydrate, it helps to process fat. So there's lots of purposes for carbohydrate, but many is a source of energy. And then fats is again another source of energy, a richer source of energy than carbohydrate, and it is responsible for such things as hormonal balance, providing the cell walls, providing integrity to cell walls for things like cholesterol and stress hormones and things like that. So fats provide also energy. I said energy, but fats are also a storage form of energy that we tend to store away because we eat a lot of carbohydrate in our diet. So fats, protein and carbohydrates have less energy per gram. Fats have the most energy per gram. So ideally we want to be using fat as energy, but I'm afraid in our diet we eat a lot of carbohydrate, which can often lead to us putting our fat away and using our readily available carbohydrate, glucose. And often we don't use enough of the glucose, and that gets put away as fat. So with regard to macronutrient balance, carbohydrates, proteins and fats, it's out for debate. It's out for debate. You know, we can't say what really we should be having as a ratio. There are arbitrary one-size-fits-all figures, and there is this what we call what would we call it? The food circle, the food wheel, the macronutrient wheel. What do we call it? The what? Sorry.
Health plate.
The health plate. Yeah. And for a long time, it's been, you know, massively carbohydrate, vegetables, fruit and vegetables, and a little bit of fat and a little bit of protein. And slowly the carbohydrate portion is shrinking, the fruit and vegetable section is expanding, the protein kind of staying the same. And what we want there is for those fats to expand as well, I think, because fat's been demonized for a long time. So, let's get back to subject, absorption. So, with regards to being able to absorb the nutrients that we eat, we need to be able to have a good, well-functioning small intestine. Okay, and in conditions such as irritable bowel disease, Crohn's disease, celiac disease, you know, these are all overt conditions where we can be tested for in a surgery, and we can, you know, we can undergo interventions to try and resolve those issues. And a lot of one thing that all of these conditions have in common, as with IBS and gut dysbiosis, is this term leaky gut, this kind of intestinal permeability. So when the stomach lining starts to let through, when the gut lining starts to let through, the barrier starts to let things through that it shouldn't, there are guards on the other side that want to try and attack these things that are coming through, and hence you get these inflammatory processes going on. And those can have, you know, those can escalate into such things as, you know, rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, even heart disease. And you know, it can go as far as mental conditions, psychological conditions. You know, because toxins that pass through the gut lining into the body, they can then pass through the blood-brain barrier, and they can affect mental health as well. So, you know, when we talk about things like depression and you know, even things like seasonal affective disorder, you know, these are all things that can be contributed to by the integrity of our small intestine. So, how do we try and, you know, optimize the function of our gut lining? First of all, has anyone been tested for gut dysbiosis or leaky gut or any form of under the radar subclinical gastrointestinal functional disorder? Has anybody been tested? Yeah, and do you mind telling us what it was for?
For abdominal pain and trying to lose weight and not losing any.
Okay.
Obvious.
Yeah. And how did you do it? Did you send off to a lab, or did you?
Gastroscopy and a colonoscopy, afterwards biopsies.
Okay.
Blood tests.
Okay. And
samples.
yeah. And did they come up with any?
Lymphoid hyperplasia.
Okay.
And irritable bowel. Sort of general.
Yeah. Anybody else? No. So.
It's a similar story, but it was what do you call it? Gluten intolerance, which led to cancer of the bowel. So that can be another issue, which is caused by eating the wrong foods. It's microphone block.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I mean, when it comes to, you know, the big C word, it's I mean, there are definite, you know, gastrointestinal contributing factors, but when it comes to gluten intolerance, you know, I haven't read any research to overtly to. However, these are all emerging, you know, kind of subjects and topics within science, and you know, it's moving at a fast rate. So whether gluten does have these widespread implications on major chronic diseases, you know, I'm sure that in the upcoming years we will get, you know, some real kind of solid evidence. So. Also, with the gut lining, it's the seat of not just the seat of our, you know, our health and our vitality, but also our immunity. We call it a barrier because that's what it does. In our small intestine we have lots of lymphoid tissue. Lymphoid tissue is part of the immune system which protects us. So you have patches within the gut which are responsible for ridding the contents of the intestine, toxic contents of the intestine, pushing it into the lymphatic system and getting rid of it out of the body. And immune function starts really with our digestive system. And this again is another emerging field, thanks to people like Michael Mosley. You've probably seen him on the TV and his documentaries about dysbiosis and intermittent fasting. It takes someone like that to really kind of bring it to public awareness, but this stuff has been known for a good 10-15 years. However, so things going in, things coming out. How do we stop the bad guys getting in? And how do we make sure that we're absorbing the nutrients that we really thrive on and need? The colon, gut bacteria. We have, what would you say, guys? Thousands? We haven't quite put a figure on it, but we're in the thousands of different strains of bacteria in the colon, in the gut generally. Okay. A lot of these are strains of certain bacteria, such as lactobacillus. You've probably heard of these, and bifidobacteria. These are good guys that that help to that basically help to keep the integrity of the gut lining. I'm trying to be as general as possible. I don't want to start using big words. And so anything that passes through the gut that gets down into such as certain carbohydrates which are indigestible, fibre and things like that, pass down into the colon. It's there that these bacteria will go to work, and they will, they may start a fermentation process that ferment anything that, sometimes it's, various, what we call fermentable oligo, poly and monosaccharides and polyols. Has anyone heard of FODMAPs? The FODMAP, I don't want to say the word diet. FODMAPs, yeah. So these are basically carbohydrates that don't get absorbed, fully digested in the small intestine, and they pass down into the colon. And there, they can be fermented and worked on by certain strains of bacteria to further promote and feed good bacteria. And as I said before, it kind of contributes to the integrity of the small intestine, the mucosa of the small intestine. So these FODMAPs, what we call them, they're ubiquitous throughout our food. So I've got a list of stuff here, which I pulled off, and Andrew has so kindly used to create some fantastic gastronomic pleasures today.
Played and put with some food, so it doesn't feel like essentially, well, a restricted menu.
Yeah. So these FODMAPs going down into the colon, that's where they're fermented. They produce certain short chain fatty acids. Let's call them fatty acids. And these fatty acids, can then be used, as I said, to feed the good bacteria and to aid the integrity of the gut lining. The question is that sometimes these short-term these fatty acids then draw water into the colon, and they can make you feel bloated. They can make you feel gassy. They create gases such as methane and hydrogen. So sometimes these carbohydrates that get left over can be problematic. And gluten is probably one of the most popular of these FODMAPs that causes irritation in the bowel. So what do we know about gluten?
So gluten is the protein in certain grains, and what they've discovered is that they used to say, when I trained 20 years ago, that oats was also gluten, so wheat, rye, barley and oats. But now they've discovered that oats is a slightly different protein, so they don't include it as part of the gluten. But in my practice, I find people often react to oats as much as the other three.
And what about glutinous rice? I've got to get in his daughter.
That's not gluten. That's just a description for the gel-likeness of the thing.
Okay, so that's not gluten.
No, that's just to confuse you, really.
And also the marketing of it's also part of that. Marketing of all types of food. Let's be honest, there's a lot of companies, more marketing gets spent on food than on cars or anything else. So all these things are low fat and fat-free and gluten-free and these are low fat compared to what? You know, limited, reduced fat. You know, well, milk would be reduced fat version of cream. You know, it's a lot of these marketing things are great little ploys that pull you in all different types of directions.
Yeah, yeah. I think that they've become very adept at manipulating the advertising standards agency. That they get round things wording, but gluten-free has to be gluten-free. Yeah. So gluten, the generalised term for a group of proteins, gliadin and things like that is responsible for. And most of us, if not all of us, have trouble digesting gluten in the small intestine. But does that make it a bad thing? Not necessarily, because most of us, you know, it will pass through, it will be fermented, short-chain fatty acids will be produced in the colon, and we'll have no issue. But for a subset of the population, they will react. And so now we have not only you know, gluten intolerance, celiac, we have you know, non-gluten sensitivity. Is it? Please help me out here.
Sensitivity,
Yeah, and obviously allergies. Allergies. If you had a wheat allergy, you probably know about that very soon. So there is a lot of emerging kind of you know, different reactions to this you know, this protein. Or this, you know, this generalised term, a group of proteins called gluten. But yeah, probably it's because it's ubiquitous throughout food. You know, it's made in sauces, marinades, you know, obviously all of the cakes, pastry, bread, blah blah blah. You know, it's because it's like a glue. Would you say? Would you say it's like and it binds things, so it's used through a lot of products.
And a lot of hidden products as well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That type of thing.
Yeah. So. And milk as well is another one. So lactose. Any lactose intolerant people here? Yeah. Okay. So another protein that is you know, a lot of us lack the enzyme lactase, which helps to break down lactose. So a lot of us, you know, have to avoid dairy products as well. So a couple of popular ones there. But you know, I've got a list of. In fact, I'll pass this around, and you can all look at it. Hopefully, it's enough. I don't know whether you might have to share a couple of them. Just pass them around. And there's some, these are low FODMAPs. So these are food food products that are low in these fermentable polymonosaccharides and polyols. Yes.
So what is it about the gluten that is difficult? If it's a protein, they all have to do it, and is it the gluiness of it?
I don't know. You know, gluten has been a part of our diet for approximately 10,000 years, would you say? Yeah, since the time when we stopped and we produced crops. We stopped roaming around.
The way they're processing it now compared to the quality you had during the war.
Yes.
Compared to now.
Yeah.
The products are different, and also we're eating so much more of it. You know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day, and it's just an overload as well. So it's poor quality and excessive load.
That would be my biggest issue, is essentially
And
the
it's
processes
the
of said
environment we're putting
gluten.
it into.
Yeah.
So the more dehydrated and acidic the environment, you make it more like that when you eat gluten, and so you start reacting to the gluten.
You mentioned acidic, we'll get back to that.
And my whole biggest issue is the hidden glutens. Essentially, that you could actually have what you think is a balanced meal, because you think, okay, I've had a starch, I've had you know, protein, and this, and meanwhile you're eating gluten, which is in virtually every meal, every part of the meal. So therefore, the banking of it, and therefore you're banking up the carbs as well, in hidden carbs, makes it very difficult, because essentially your pyramid, triangle, or whatever you want to call it, starts going awry because you've got the hidden ones.
I mean, I'll just ask a simple question. Who does not eat bread in here? Yeah, so what?
Who does not eat bread?
Not many people. You don't eat bread. Not much, but you eat bread. Okay. So, that kind of says it all, doesn't it? That is,
my rich ones, I get 50% of people not eating.
well, saying that, you could eat sourdough. Do any of you eat sourdough that eat bread?
Yes.
Yeah, like that. Okay. Because the fermentation process.
It's not even real sourdough,
Is it not?
therein lies there's a lot of...
No wonder I keep getting... And so, yeah, there we go. That's how ubiquitous it is in our everyday lives.
I think you have
we all have a slice of bread, and you know.
I think so. Some people think they're intolerant to gluten, but actually, it could be that they're intolerant to yeast. They might be reacting to the yeast in the bread. So it's not necessarily.
No.
You know, you automatically think it's because you have a piece of bread that you can find without actually a good yeast element in it.
Yeah. The nature of the highly processed matter of the way it's been going through.
Yeah, and gluten gets, and so for these many reasons, gluten will get a bad rap. And obviously the kind of escalation and the sensationalized, you know, kind of diet world, gluten-free has become the new, you know, the new healthy diet. However, you know, it's exaggerated because, you know, if you don't have any symptoms with gluten, it's not necessarily going to make you a healthier person. Would you agree, guys? Would you agree, Sophie?
Sorry?
If you don't have symptoms of gluten, with gluten, going gluten-free isn't going to make you necessarily a healthier person.
I don't know.
So how do you know if you're gluten intolerant?
Well, you would eat bread, and then you would probably see if you get any gastrointestinal symptoms, such as gas, bloating. I mean, if you had an allergy, you would probably straight away know it. You'd probably get inflammation. You'd probably maybe get, you know, slightly worse symptoms, such as, you know, difficulty breathing, blah blah blah. So a typical.
Generally, people don't have that, and I just don't know how you know. I mean, I don't go to you.
A lot of people with foreign
You can have food tolerance testing to kind of isolate. It's quite difficult to know which foods you react to. You know, elimination diets are really, really tricky.
Yeah.
You just don't know. And it's distance, you can, and that can help. Give you a bit of a steer which way you're going. Because as I say, sometimes it's not gluten. Exactly.
A lot of people say, like, we were lethargic before, so now we gave up gluten. Well, they replaced it with something that probably gave them more energy.
Yeah.
So automatically they go, gluten is, I get so gluten intolerant, I used to be so, like, you know, lazy, and meanwhile they've now replaced it with a better, a cleaner gluten, like barley or something like that, or more vegetables, because they're not eating a large amount of the bread. So essentially they substitute and they will feel better.
Can I just mention, because my daughter suffers from really, really bad bloating to the extent that some of her colleagues states, Sarah, you need to go and get a pregnancy test. Because she used to go like from practically 6-pack to looking as if she was 7 months pregnant.
Okay.
But we were trying to figure out what it was. You know, sometimes you used to have bread, oh, it was this, or it was that. And yes, I persuaded to go and see Shane, and Shane put on a low FODMAP diet with some supplements on the top as well. And the difference was incredible. She's like been on holiday, so she's got to get back into it. But, you know, Shane was able to introduce some sensible ideas, and it's not, what do you say, it's something that needs to be sustainable.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So it's not like I'm going to cut this out for the rest of my life because it's bad for me. I mean, you reintroduce things on a gradual basis to see what your true foods are.
So the FODMAP diet is probably, you regard it as a 2-phase operation, where the first phase is to reduce these FODMAPs in your diet with the foods that you have there in front of you. And you probably wouldn't do it for longer than 6 weeks, because here's the rub. FODMAPs are good for you. We've already discussed that, you know, these carbohydrates, these short, what we would call short chain carbohydrates that get left into the corn, can produce really good proteins which help the gut and the friendly bacteria. So we don't want to completely throw the baby out with the bathwater, and after 6 weeks you start to reintroduce certain FODMAPs, the ones that you would suspect irritate, and see how you respond to them. It is tricky, but you can't restrict them forever. So you need to be able to, you know, tactically, strategically bring back in the foods that you've eliminated and see which ones are the culprits. And you will slowly get to a conclusion where some things are just not going to be.
And so it's not that a cleansing essentially stops, because then you can establish what is your triggers from there on. Because you'll be able to have essentially a clean, fresh situation. But we eat badly and then essentially you feel like, well, I feel better today, and essentially into like a 2-3 week diet, and I use the word diet, is essentially, yes, you'll get different types of energy, but this type of thing, you start off with essentially a good 6-week cleanse and then develop a lifestyle from it, but then also as well, you'll be able to catch your triggers very quickly because you would have essentially felt good for a long period of time because of the diet.
Yeah, I mean, it can be almost immediate. The people that I've had on the low FODMAP diet, you know, it's almost been quite immediate. Was it with your daughter? It was quite. Was it quite
I was really
soon?
surprised. You know, she was fine, and then went out for a Mexican meal with friends, and of course that was it, straight on bloating because you couldn't get things that were on low FODMAP. But I think the supplements which Shane had introduced as well, so that there's liquid coating, the leaky gut.
Yeah.
Did I get the word right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. A few other things
Glutamine
like,
or glucosamine?
Glutamine.
glutamine, I had to get one, and the oregano, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are different
Oregano,
things
yeah.
which Sarah had
Yeah.
while she was eating that to sort of strengthen the system.
Yeah.
I'd also like to bring up later as well that if you are on these type of diets, what you can do in restaurants. What type of, when you go to restaurants, I think a lot of people sit there and go, I'm just going to ask the chef this, I'm just going to do this, and do this. And I can say to you, look, this is what's easy for us to do in kitchens. So that at least you can go and say, fine, I'm going in, I'm going to a person who has a chain of things that all going in a perfect way, but then you can say, fine, I can eat this on it, and that wouldn't take long for a kitchen, you wouldn't be inconveniencing, but in all sincerity, you're paying them pounds, that would be an inconvenience. I need some water. Would you make some water?
Yeah, so this protocol, you know, it shouldn't be forever, but it's a great way, and what I'm trying to demonstrate here is there's a lot of variety. You know, we often see, you know, clinical protocols with nutrition is very restrictive, and you know, I've had some far out wacky diets for, you know, for improving the gut, where people have had to literally lead Spartan lifestyles for months. But this, you know, it's quite flexible. It's quite a lot there, isn't there, really? So, you know, you can start to get to the bottom of these triggers. Now, often a lot of people think, oh, probiotics, prebiotics, that's the key. And these FODMAPs generally, the high FODMAPs, they're what we would call prebiotics, because the short-chain fatty acids that are produced, they go and help the good the good bacteria. So the definition of a prebiotic is a substrate or a food or a molecule that will go and aid or help the good bacteria. The definition of a probiotic is a live molecule that is beneficial for the host, something like that. Would you agree? So it's a live bacteria that is beneficial for the host. So
we can use the word culture.
Yeah,
because we think of yogurt. It's the only culture my family has.
Absolutely. So what people tend to do is go, oh no, let's just go get some prebiotics. If you've got bloating and gas and just go bang some prebiotics and probiotics. Meanwhile, they're eating all of the things which irritate them, and it isn't going to work. So we do have to practice a little bit of abstinence. Practice with a capital P, because that's what it's all about. It's about the implementation of knowledge, not just knowing it. Okay. So the FODMAP diet. There you go. Monash University is a university in Australia that came up with these. They basically, through their research, created and tested foods for their levels of these fermentable oligo, poly, and monosaccharides and polyols, and they created a list of foods. Now you can get this on an app, so I think I've left a link on there for the university. You can go there and you can just download the app, and straight away it will give you a green and red light system of all these different foods. It goes in alphabetical order, and I've just taken all those foods off there, and you can see what's good and what's not. Yeah, so if you do know people that are suffering, or you are suffering from any of these, kind of common gastrointestinal symptoms, you can go on there and start to devise your own protocol.
Does this help with acid reflux as well?
Acid reflux? Not necessarily. I mean, acid reflux is, again, it can be helped through diet, but I don't know whether the FODMAP approach is the best thing for that.
Personally, I found it.
Yeah? Okay. So you've got, in today's society, what do? We go get some omeprazole, or we go get something to suppress the pepsin and the gastric acid that we're producing. But really, is that the best way? Because it's there to digest our protein and give us amino acids, blah, blah. And so we should address GERD, what do you call it, GORD or GERD? We should address that really through our diet, first of all. We shouldn't be going and getting a proton pump inhibitor, or something that suppresses our gastric acid straight away. We should try, what we would call, what's the conservative measures, shouldn't we?